Nigeria, and he's going to tell us a little bit. First, I guess my first question is, how did you get to Arkansas?
You know,
How did
that's a good question.
that?
The honest answer is through a relative that told me I should forget about the Nigerian education system, and for what I want to do, I should really consider going abroad, but I did not even know what that meant. And he helped me a lot. So that relative is the one that got me here.
Okay.
And then I did not know. I was just thinking, oh, it's in America, so everywhere must be good. So I did not know too much about Arkansas. He just told me that where I'm going is a place where I can focus,
Hmm.
and I've always tried to remember that. And I think he was spot on in my experiences now staying in the United States as a student.
So he did come here, or he did not come here as a student?
He did. So he actually is now. He's been living in America since he left Nigeria and immigrated here. Yeah, it was an uncle of mine, so that's how I got introduced to this country and then Arkansas.
Okay.
So yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, that's interesting, the process of you getting here. So I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about your research, but I want to talk about how I know Timmy. Timmy is actually very active on campus. We're both on the Graduate Student Professional Congress on campus and
Mm,
over the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, right? So we're both
yes,
co-chairs.
ma'am.
Timmy is also president of the Black Graduate Student Association at, on our campus, which is really dope because we have a very diverse body of Black students on campus, and I think
Hmm.
it is a large task to take on to try and like congregate those large, diverse Black groups,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And not only Black people, right? Because it's open to everybody.
yep.
But let's talk about molecular biology, right? So me and Timmy have had a conversation before, right? About science and things of that nature. Like, I'm a sci-fi chick, which if you watch any of this show, you know, right? I'm all into sci-fi, so I'm very excited about not necessarily molecular biology, but what Timmy told me, right? Is molecular biology, right? As far as the overarching goals, okay. But before
Hmm.
we even get into that, right? And Timmy, we're having a conversation about the brain, right? And I said, well, we only use 10% of our brain, so
Hmm. And
maybe. And then
I,
Timmy was like, girl,
very politely, I said it was bullshit.
right? So before we
Oh,
get into
sorry
your
for the
research,
language as
could you
well.
explain to us as a scientist, right? Someone who's informed, why we use
Mm.
more than 10% of our brain.
All right. So to the best of my understanding, so again, I'm not for the easiest way brain scientist that way, but the way I understand it is that we use all of our brain at once.
Hmm.
The thing is, I think the myth I should first say is when people say 10%, people like to think of how they navigate the world. So the cognitive part of them that they use and how they for decision making. There's a lot of myths saying that that's just 10% of your brain when all of your brain is working all the time to control and help you just stay alive and do everything in your body. So there's the cognitive part, the cognitive and sort of conscious aspect of it where you make decisions, and there's all the stuff that you don't control, like your heart beating and digestion and all these things. Your brain does all of it. So your brain is working 100% of the time. But I think everybody likes to think every part of the brain can be used for that decision making process. And that's
Hmm.
not necessarily true,
Hmm.
So our brain is working 100% of the time. And then we have special parts of our brain, as far as I'm concerned, to my knowledge, that we just use for our day to day conscious decision making. And
Hmm.
that's
Okay. So we're using our whole brain all the time
all the
because there
time.
are several things that we do unconsciously, right?
Hmm. Yep. Yep.
Like breathing,
Yep. Hmm.
which makes sense, which is why I
Hmm.
can't run because you have to breathe and run at the same time, right? You have to like
Exactly.
breathe in syncopation. It takes a lot of brain power. You know what I'm saying? For me, which is why I'm not a runner because I have like 2 minutes and it's over.
You fine. Like all the little things, right? Like your reflexes, maybe, Well,
Mm.
no, I take that back. Because a
Okay.
lot of, okay, it's me thinking out loud, but a lot some reflexes are part of your autonomic nervous system. So that's the part that's not connected to the brain. So
Mm,
your nervous system is this big thing where you have the central part, that's your brain and your spinal cord, and then you have the what you can call the peripheral nervous system, right? The part that's attached to the spinal cord that can control certain things. So a lot of some reflexes are very peripheral.
mm,
They're not necessarily coordinated by the brain, but then there are the other things that the brain does that are directly linked to your nervous system. For example, your eyes. You don't think about when I open my eyes, I'm going to just see these things. You are seeing it and it's being processed directly to the brain or being
mm,
sent to the brain and the brain is processing these images. You're not consciously thinking about, let me think about instead of seeing this banana, see an apple.
yes,
So
yes.
those are the sort of things the brain does all the time.
Okay.
You don't consciously think about them.
And nobody is necessarily mapping what part of the brain is being utilized during those times.
So I think with how science is going, a lot of people are now they're better tools. So people are now starting to figure out the parts of the brain that control different behaviors and things like that. So we're beginning to figure out a lot of what the brain can do. And now that there's this technology called like single cell technologies, they call it single cell RNA technology and genomic technology. So
Mm-hmm.
now people are now able to get like the full diversity of all the different cells that the brain has. So that can probably give us a better idea of what some of these things do.
Hmm.
And we're only literally just starting to do that.
Okay.
And even just seeing how the brain is structured, now we have better imaging tools and better ways of looking at how the brain is compartmentalized and how the different neurons in the brain are connected. So it's only honestly very recently, when I say recent, within the last 5 years to a decade, that we're beginning to even look at these things.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot that we don't know, and for the things we do know, we're probably gonna learn a lot more about them, and maybe as science goes, maybe some things we get stronger information on, some things we refute. Like we're like, okay, this was true, but yada 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 yada.
Yeah, most def. Yeah, peer review process, right? Like you have to go through what am I saying? Trial and error. That's what I'm
Yep,
thinking about.
constantly. That to me, that's like half of science.
Right.
Just try.
Yes. Okay, so one of the things I'm focused on this semester is like the PhD process, like school process,
Mm-hmm.
what it took to get in, you know what I'm saying? What it's like being in, you know what I'm saying? So I would like to know a little bit about your process, understanding that we still haven't talked about what it is that you study, right? And then we're going to talk about that as well, right?
Okay.
So just like as a black man in sciences, right? Not only a black man, right, but a foreigner, right? In
Mm-hmm.
sciences, yes. What
Mm-hmm.
has that process been like for you, right? Are you happy that you're getting an advanced degree? Because there are still several conversations around it not being necessary for advanced
Hmm.
degrees. We have a new president coming into office soon, and they're talking
Agent
about
Orange.
from the education department, right? Which I don't know. I'm
Woo!
just saying, So, but even outside of that, before, right? There particularly in American culture, there have always been conversations around whether or not it's necessary to have advanced degrees, right? Is it a waste to spend your money on college? You know what I'm saying? So that along with the process and what it's taken, you know what I'm saying, for you to get your degree, right? And what it's going to
Mm-hmm.
take for you to ideally reach some of your, goals for your
Mm-hmm.
advanced degree. You know what I'm saying? Could you just talk
Mm-hmm.
to us a little bit about, being a PhD student, right? What that process was like moving from because you jumped from BA to PhD, right? A lot of people don't know that you don't have to go BA, master's, PhD. You can go into a PhD program from your BA, right? So
Mm-hmm.
talk
Yep.
to us a little bit about that, please, from your perspective.
Thank you. From my perspective, all right. With To keep it as honest as possible, I've thought about this before, so I'll just give my answers uncurated, right? So jumping from a BA to a PhD is something that's particularly only possible or majority of the time in the United States. So that it's to for a lot of people is a positive thing because maybe you don't have to spend time getting an intermediate degree like a master's. But a con of that is it can be a big, very big jump because the structure of a PhD is significantly different from undergraduate bachelor degree for me. And to me, that was very hard, especially as somebody that was not in a research environment for majority of my undergrad. So it was a big learning curve to just understand that environment and the dynamics of being in that environment, let alone before I start getting into my degree and then the things I need to do to graduate and then for research and to even be successful. I think
Mhm.
those are all like separate connected things. But for me it was tough.
Mhm.
Um, because I had to rely on the experiences of a lot of people that have gone through this program, and a lot of the people that have gone through this program, majority of the time, do not look like me. So meaning they were either not people of color, and also they did not have my experiences, my background, right? Maybe they were not Nigerian or West African or if black. Period.
Mhm.
Since I've been in my degree program, I'll be very honest with you. There's been only one other black person that I've seen graduate from my department from my program since I've been here.
Black male or black person?
No, black, sorry, thank you, black man, black male.
Okay.
There's been three, it's no more than 10
Mhm.
black women over the span of, was it the 6, 7 years now that I've been doing this?
Mhm.
But I should say for my journey, after my bachelor's, I actually started a master's program
Mhm.
because I came from a country where as soon as if you want to do a PhD, you should get your master's, and that was my motivation, was to get a master's degree before I did the PhD. So it was at some point when I think I was on the tail end of the master's, so 2 years in, 2.5 years into that, I was like, had a conversation with another professor, and he was like, just switch, and I was like, oh, okay. So I switched to the PhD program, and that's a very privileged thing, honestly, because there are a lot of programs where that might not be possible. There are a lot of people that might say, okay, you have to finish your degree program and then reapply to then
Mhm.
enter the PhD program. So I was very privileged that I was able to just contact the graduate school and make that switch because I was already admitted as a graduate student. So all
Right.
they had to do was change my degree program from master's to PhD, and
Yes.
I was very lucky that way.
Yes.
It might have not been that way in the past, so I'm very privileged to even have that. But
Mhm.
then entering the PhD program was very interesting because my journey was I started my research, and so when you start your PhD, the goal is to accomplish so have a body of work, do your research in something. So I started my research looking at microscopic organisms, and then a year and a half from the switch, I had to leave that lab and completely stop that research and start working with animals. And that was a very big change for me
Mm.
because yeah, there's the parts where the work overlap was using certain concepts in biology like evolution. That's really the big basis of almost all my studies.
Mhm.
Having to switch from studying things that you can't see with your naked eye to things you can
Mhm.
see with your eye was
Mhm.
a big change because that means there's scale change.
Mhm.
And working with animals is very different from working with something that's just one tiny organism and it's just one
Mhm.
cell. So that was a little tough, and I didn't have structure for that. I'll be very honest. I didn't really have a way to understand how those changes was going to affect me and my process of thinking and my coursework. And I think that's something that I'm hoping is getting better at this campus, at this university and my department. So that's one part of it. But then for the process of being a PhD student, it's something that I've worked on constantly. So like I've always tried to improve on it every time
Mhm.
because the way my current advisor tells me, and it's sort of the way I thought about it, but now I use the way he said it because it's more structured, right? Is you have this big goal that you wanna accomplish, but the big goal can be many things. And for a lot of PhDs, it's as simple as what are the things we don't know? Where are the knowledge gaps? And how can I fill those gaps?
Mhm.
And you make a PhD out of that.
Mhm.
But then you have to be very strategic because time is limited. And for me, that's a bigger reality because I'm here on a visa.
Mm-hmm.
And once that expires, I gotta make sure I have a degree at the end of the day. So I have to be very strategic with how I'm getting results and asking these questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you asked the question of what's that process like
Mm-hmm.
of the PhD for me. I would say it's like storytelling, but storytelling in the sense where if there's a positive message, you're trying to make sure you get that across.
Mm.
And I always keep that message, that big picture is always the thing in my rear view is how I'm looking at everything. How am I walking towards this picture? And then what are the steps I need to do to get there? So I'm not like the thing my advisor says is walking in darkness. You want to see where you're going. You don't want to
Mm.
take a bunch of random steps and then hope you get there. You might
Mm.
get there, you just don't know how long.
Mm.
Time is not something I have.
Right.
I have the luxury. Or honestly, all of us we don't have the luxury of spending as much time on this because time is money. There's still a student cost to being a PhD student, and for a lot of us, we don't get paid as we should. But that's a topic for another day. We don't want to be students forever.
No.
So the process for me is understanding what the bigger picture is, what I'm trying to contribute to that, and the steps I need to take there. It's just having a plan of what's the big picture, what are the objectives I need to accomplish, and how I can execute them.
For
That
sure.
that's the process for me.
Okay.
I think it sounds a little too cookie cutter, maybe. I can be more
No, not at
detailed.
all. Like there was a lot of adversity in your
Mhm.
process, right? So like
Mhm.
you first started in a master's program, then
Mhm.
someone spoke to you, you decided to do something different, you jumped, didn't finish your master's program, jumped to a PhD program,
Mhm.
right? And you started your program for a year and a half
Mhm.
and chose one track and then ended up choosing a different track, right? A lot of people
Mhm.
don't understand that in PhD programs there are several different tracks you can take, right? Our PhD program has two tracks, right? Yours seems like it has a couple different tracks, right? So you started
Mhm.
on one track for a year and a half, right?
Mhm.
Then switched into a whole new track, right? Which
Mhm.
had a whole different process for you.
Yep.
It sounds like now you're at like an execution phase, right? You can't like
Mhm.
be wandering in the dark, but it does sound like there was a little bit of wandering in the dark, right? Because you
It
had like
was it was a lot of
yeah,
yep. It was a
yeah,
lot of wondering.
yeah, it was a little wondering, right? So that's part of the process, but we don't want to stay there, right?
Yeah,
So
we don't.
I feel you can't stay there, right? So you can't wander forever, and then
Mm-mm.
we have to get to a point where we have a clear plan, a clear outline, um,
Mhm.
that we are in alignment with our advisor,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
We can't have two different plans, right? Because somebody
Yep.
got to sign off on it, right?
Yep.
So no, I feel you. Yes, no, that makes a
Mhm.
whole lot of sense, and it doesn't sound cookie cutter at all. No,
You
it
you
sounds like
you're
a
right.
process.
You're right.
Sounds like a process. Yes.
It's a process.
So I guess so now I want to know about your research, right? First
Okay.
tell me what is cellular molecular biology in
Mhm.
layman's term, not in science terms, right? What is
Mhm.
cellular molecular biology? What does it mean to me? Right? It's just a person like so why do I care about it?
The way I like to look at it is there are a bunch of things that are alive on this planet, and one of those things includes us and a lot of other animals. And animals can do a lot of different things, and the things that allows them to do those different things are this individual thing is called cells that build us up. And so for the cells to
I'm sorry,
work
is
together,
it I'm
yes,
sorry, I
ma'am.
didn't mean because you're on the so you tell cells allow us to do these different things like
Yep.
breathing? Is that
Yes,
what you
ma'am.
mean? Like everything? Okay, keep going. I'm sorry. So cells allow us to do
No, you're
everything.
fine.
Is that what you're saying?
Every
Everything.
single thing we need to do to live our lives is done
Gotcha.
because a bunch of cells are working together to control that process of to like facilitate it. So 100%, it's cells, and for us to get better understandings of some processes, we need to understand the building blocks. And if cells are the building blocks of these things and the building blocks of really life, we need to understand the things that keep a cell functioning and all those things. And that's where cellular and molecular biology comes in play because that's when you start to look at all the things that are then building blocks inside the cell to keep that cell good. And then once you
Okay.
understand that, you understand how the cell keeps the bigger system, which can be a body,
Okay. So you're
good and
looking at
stuff.
the individual cell as well as how they work together.
Yes.
Okay. Is this similar to cells at work?
Like the anime?
Yes.
More or less. Basically that. So like you have all this like what was in the anime. You have the red blood cells and the immune
And the
system
white blood
work
cells.
and the white blood cells, yeah, working together to keep the body safe. But as even in that, right, they have different instructions where they can all do very specific tasks. So
Hmm.
that's their function, right? So what is the thing that gives them that instruction? So I look at all those like processes that even then control the cells and the things that give rise to the cells and tell and give information to the cells about what they need to do.
So
That's
are you looking
where
at, sorry, go ahead. Mhm.
no. Go ahead. Go.
So are you looking at like all the cells? I'm sorry, because now I'm in the anime. So I'm looking like the commander T cell, you know what I'm saying? And then I'm looking at like the white cell, and then I'm
Mhm.
looking at, like the T cell that was over all the kill cells. Is
Mhm.
that real? Is there really like a commander T cell? Or
So
no?
in a way, there's sort of cells in some animals that coordinate immune defenses. So
Okay.
that is a nice visual of that. But
Okay.
like for my own work, I just look at a particular type of cell type,
Okay.
cells that do a bunch of different things.
So you look at one type of cell. So like if we're talking about the anime, because that's where I am, right? So we have white, red, and then we have these T cell things. You're not looking at all three of them. You're looking at one.
I'm looking at a whole different
And a whole different
type
one,
of
not one of
cell.
those.
Not one of those. Not one of
Okay.
those.
Is this a human
So
cell that we're looking at?
I'm looking at a cell that it can be found in a lot of different living things. So in a lot of animals, and as far as I know, we use animals as the reference point. So it's a cell type that we believe evolved in that has is it how I it's a cell type that has evolved up in a lot of living things and maybe in almost all animal groups and maybe in some like a unicellular thing. So organisms that are just one cell.
Yeah.
They have some of them have this thing that allows them to be touch sensitive.
Hmm.
So we call that mechanosensation. So like, something touches you, you feel it.
What is an
And
example of a one cell animal?
an amoeba, you know,
An
an
amoeba.
amoeba is a one cell animal. Some fungi can be one celled. Yeah, amoebas are
So
some
it's one cell
amoebas.
that's replicated over and over again, or is literally one cell?
No, it's literally is I mean, so they can replicate themselves to make more of themselves, but it's
Yeah,
just one cell. Like meaning everything they need to do for life, they can do it in one
with the
cell,
one cell.
which means eat, reproduce, and die. It just takes one cell for some living things.
And how many cells do we have?
In our
Human?
body,
Like, sure.
that's a good
Different
question.
cells, I mean. I know that we have
Oh,
trillions, but we have more than one,
probably
right?
probably millions, billions.
Different types.
We got a ton of different types of cells.
So why do we need all of these different types if it only takes one cell to breathe, sleep, and eat?
Well, that's where evolution comes into place. Well, let me slow down. Let me slow my roll. So it's because we're different. Because an amoeba, for example,
Yes.
does not need to be multicellular, which is what we are. We are a bunch of cells that have come together and is now a collective being. An
Mm-hmm.
amoeba doesn't, some amoeba, not all of them, some of them don't have to do that. They're not multicellular. So there's unicellular life where it's just one cell, and then
Yes.
there's multicellular life where it's like this banana, it's a bunch of cells doing one thing, So,
Thank you. That does help, right? So amoeba is what you showed me in the lab, correct? That's an amoeba, or is that something else?
so what I
It's
showed you was a
similar.
very, very tiny animal.
Okay, it has more than one cell.
It has more than one cell.
Okay, that's all. That's what I need to understand because I'm trying to
Okay.
make that a one cell. I'm like, how is that a one cell animal? Because it's not.
No, it's not.
Fungus is, and I wish we had pictures. I would
Actually,
love
if I could share my screen, I could give
Please,
you
you sure
pictures.
can.
Oh,
Press
I
the
can.
yeah,
Okay.
press that screen. Thank
Let me get something and then I'll pull it up.
you. No worries. Yes, I'm gonna let you. While you're doing that, I'm gonna talk a little bit about my stuff so that we don't have any downtime.
All right, I got
Right.
you. I got you.
So, as you may or may not know, my research is in like digital narratives. I look specifically at like
Mhm.
AR and AI and VR and the way that we tell stories online through interactive
Mhm.
design.
Mhm.
So I have talked to Timmy a bit about these like molecular biology and like how we might be able to craft some type of interactive design to better just understand the process, because I told him that here, as far as my experience is concerned, in the United States, you know what I'm saying, I want to say like around eighth or ninth grade is when they
Mhm.
start discouraging students from tech, right, as far as like
Mhm.
science and like math and things of that nature. They make it seem like really hard or just not something that is exciting really in experiments. I
Mhm.
remember when I lived in California and I was in science class, we had to like open like a worm and we had to like dissect the heart and like there
Mhm.
were all kinds of things that we got to do. And then when I moved down to the south, there were there none of that happened anymore, right? You just look at a book and a
Really?
teacher who's not engaged. Yeah.
So in a way that reflects the education system that like education is not the same in well, the quality of education for a lot of people for certain things is just not the same.
It's not, especially depending on what region you're in. And of course, like the area, because, education is based on taxes, you know what I'm saying, from
Yeah.
surrounding houses. So if y'all don't got no tax bracket, then you don't have no resources.
And that was already a problem. Now there's a very good chance they want to remove the Department of Education. So there will be no policing. Is that the word? Like
Policy, no, like no oversight. Yeah, I think what's going to
that's
happen,
worrisome.
yeah, it is. As you know, here in Arkansas, we already have the thing where you can pull your kids out of public school system and use that money for private
Mhm.
schools. So I think a lot
Mhm.
of people are kind of moving towards that, just,
Mhm.
towards a private online alternative, small homeschool
Mhm.
option. We've been doing that since 2020, but we can talk about that later. We're looking for
Okay.
an uh and we're looking for an amoeba.
Yeah, I got you.
You got it? Okay.
I got you. So I'll share my screen. All right. So here's one. Can you see it?
Yes.
All right. So these are a bunch of different amoebas.
Mm-hmm.
So this one is actually one cell
Mm-hmm.
right here. So it's just something like this eventually starts to go through another process and then it forms something like this where then when it's within here, that one cell can divide and then this can burst open and give rise to a bunch more other cells, that can
What are they
happen.
eating?
So amoeba tend to eat bacteria and fungi and
Okay.
other little critters too. They're very greedy. But for the most part, they tend to eat bacteria.
And where do we find these? Is this like something that's like in the airs on skin? Is it in like a particular area? Like where do we find this? And is
Amoeba.
this like a micros like under a microscope that I can only see this? Because this looks really small. I couldn't see this like
So
eye.
funny enough, the ones that are very small, you might need a microscope for sure to see them.
Mm-hmm.
But some amoeba can make structures that you can see with the naked eye, like this thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you see these things here where in like C, A, and B.
Mm-hmm.
So these are actually collections of multiple different amoeba cells together to make uh we call it an aggregate structure. So we don't say multicellular because it doesn't necessarily resemble the type of multicellular structures that we see in like plants and animals.
Okay.
So it's its own thing, and that's another thing too is that like the things that are multicellular don't have the same origin. So like in plants, I'm just gonna digress. So like here are animals right
Mm-hmm.
here. This
Mm-hmm.
is this thing called metazoa.
Mm-hmm.
This is all the animals.
Mm-hmm.
And there's multicellularity here, there's multicellularity in fungi, there's
Okay.
multicellularity in amoebae, there's multicellularity in plants. This branch here is the thing that gives rise to plants.
Okay.
And there's almost some example of multicellularity across all of the tree of life.
Yeah.
And it seems to have happened on its own, meaning that the ancestor of these things, of maybe all life on Earth, did not have multicellularity. Multicellularity just evolved independently for a lot
Mm.
of different groups of living things.
What's the gray area? The gray area is not multicellular.
So those are the things where we don't know where they sort of like group into.
Mm.
So we call them, so all there are two, three sort of types of life, eukaryotes,
Mm-hmm.
bacteria, and archaea. So bacteria and archaea are not related to, they are not eukaryotes, so they form their own groups. But then within the eukaryotes, we have all these super groups where all these things fall into.
Mm-hmm.
And where animals fall into are this group of things called the opisthocons. And
Mm-hmm.
that's actually sister to the amoebas.
Mm.
So we are more closely related to these little things than we are to that banana I showed you earlier,
That's
which would
crazy.
be a plant, you know.
Okay, and so according to this tree, your like proximity to the different branches is the closest never like relation to them.
Yes. So for us, relation is like what's the closest ancestor you have, and the way you can think of an ancestor is where two branches connect. So the
Yeah.
branch where amoebas connect here versus the branch where amoebas and plants connects is much closer for these two things than here. So we then say they share a more recent ancestor than the ancestor that for plants, amoebas, and animals. So that's why we are more closely related to amoebas than we are to plants, you know.
Okay.
Mm. But yeah, these are like unicellular things, and they can have this sort of multicellular structures. And
So
then
I can't see it if it's a single cell, but once it's multiplied itself and made itself a multicellular structure of the one cell, I should be able to see it with my naked eye.
yeah, you can tend to see it. And to be honest, even this sort of tiny structures, you can sort of see it, but you kind of have to know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, some things that are just one cell, you can see them. And like to be fair, the biggest one cell, and there are different type of one cell structures, and there are some cells that are just one single cell you can see with the naked eye, which is pretty incredible. There are some amoebas that are so big that they could probably even cover the bottom of a swimming pool or something like that, you know?
So tell me again, like where are these cells being formed? Like where would I find these single cell organisms? This something that's like in the air, it's on my skin, it's in the dirt, like when I
Every
sit on the bus,
everywhere,
everywhere.
everywhere.
I got them on me right now.
You probably have some amoeba on you. They might not be in you, they might be on you. They might
That's what I mean on
be.
my skin.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about amoebas I can tell you is that they have like a very big range where they can live. They can be found in very wet places. They can be found in very dry places. They're very sturdy organisms. They they have a hard time going away. I can tell you that because they have different strategies they can use to then survive harsh conditions. For
Right.
example, you can find them in the atmosphere in like a different form, like in a spore form that helps protect them from like really harsh conditions. So like you're probably breathing in some amoeba spores right now.
Mm.
You know, it's just they're everywhere.
Mm. What's the purpose, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I guess because the way that I understand a spore is a
Mm-hmm.
virus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
So
why
I
are they here?
will. No, go ahead. What do you say?
I'm saying why are they here? What's the
Why are they
point?
here?
Why do they exist?
I would say why they exist the same way we exist.
That's a
There
good.
was there was just the how I like to think about life on this planet. First of all, I'll say this one thing: the only example of life we know in the universe that we know is on this planet. And
Hmm.
because of that, when we think about how life started, there you look at this planet and you see the diversity of so many things, whether it's bacteria or like I just showed you that tree of a bunch of different critters.
Hmm.
And as far as we're concerned, there was probably one origin that led to a population of things that eventually gave rise to life. And then as the environment changed, what happened was they started to get different pressures. So one batch of things evolved or became specialized for that environment. And as this time went on, different things happened where some of them eventually became multicellular and gave rise to plants and animals. And then some things, maybe there was better evolutionary pressure sometimes people call that selection, right? Natural selection, not to maintain the ability to be multicellular. So in a way, they just maintain that they just maintain their forms. For example, if you think about it, I hate to use this example. We can die. Like everything that is an animal can die, but all these little critters, bacteria, and maybe they'll be around because they
Mm,
are well suited to survive in almost anything.
mm,
While obviously we are not, you know.
mm,
So,
mm-hmm.
every sort of living thing has a different strategy. So the reason why they're here is the reason why we're here. We just came from an ancestor of things that eventually became, let me for I don't like to use the word, but lack of the better term, specialized, and we survived in the environment we can survive. While these things evolved to survive in a variety of different things, and that's really it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have like way more questions, but I'm just gonna save that for another time because like
Okay.
now you got my mind going down like a whole other path because we still haven't talked about your research, but you said a few things I wanted to reiterate that I think are really, really important.
Mhm.
Um, the first thing I kind of want to reiterate is that like science is not exact. Right. I think a
Mhm.
lot of times people look at scientists and like MDs and, like certain types of engineers, things of that nature, and they think that
Mhm.
you are coming up with like exact methods, right? And I think that is the process, right? That I mean, the hope is to get to something that like shows a
Mhm.
process or a method or something of that nature. But like it's not
Mhm.
an exact science. Y'all are out here,
Mhm.
figuring it out, like testing and hypothesizing and you know what I'm saying, and
Mhm.
trying to figure out how things go together, and that is the purpose of research because it takes a lot of money, it takes time,
Mhm.
right? It takes ability, it takes a whole lot of people who are interested in the same thing coming together, and a lot of times we don't have that space outside of the university, right? It just doesn't exist, and a lot of times for us to make those major steps forward, right, it takes a space like this, right, to at least get to plant the seed or to get the ball rolling, right,
Yes.
to
Yes,
the
ma'am. Mhm.
university space. Now, having said that, I want to talk a little bit about your research. Yes. So, because your research is very specific, I'm about
Mhm.
to mess it up right quick and then you can reel me back in. Okay.
Pretty good. I got a PowerPoint. I'll just show you one image and that's
Awesome.
it. Uh-huh.
Awesome. Okay. So, I'm going to tell you what I think Timmy does, and Timmy's going to tell you what he really does. Okay. So, Timmy is eventually going to teach us how to grow limbs, right?
That's a very privileged. It's the mad scientist idea, but maybe I'll get there. Sorry, I cut you off.
Or at
Keep going,
least
keep
first
going.
steps, you know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah,
that's
yeah. Uh-huh.
what I was trying to say beforehand. Like a lot of the progress that we have right now is based on hundreds of years of research, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes 10 years of research, but sometimes like a lot of research, right? We got to take
Mhm.
steps. We got to make accidents, and then we get to, you got to find which paths are dead end before you get to the one that like goes to the promised
Yeah.
land. But now tell
Well,
me
one
what you
hundred
really do,
percent.
right? Because I know you don't grow limbs yet.
Ooh, what do I really do?
Mhm.
I'm still figuring that out. No, I'm kidding. Well, I hope by now I have a better idea.
Ask this though. I'm sorry because I do want to know this. What is your major research question that you're asking, right? And
Mhm.
how will what you are some the things that you're trying to answer like
Mhm.
ultimately contribute to society? Like, what's the point?
Okay. So I will say there was something you mentioned, how we need to take little steps before we can even address some of these really, really large things and things that have a lot of value to us. And for us, like I call it basic science. And it's so, like sometimes people just, it's sort of a double-edged sword where sometimes some people just do research for the sake of doing research.
Hmm.
And then some people do basic science so we can understand how all these systems work together. So we can then have better tools or better, like, new avenues to address some of these questions.
Hmm.
And I like to believe I fall into the latter. As with that answer, I'm just gonna segue into sort of what I do. So with what I do, I'm gonna share something real quick.
Yes, I'm excited.
So essentially, this one little image is sort of everything I do, and I'll explain what the image is. But I do basic science in the sense of I'm trying to understand some aspects of development, and when I understand how that development happened, it gives me a better idea of evolution.
Hmm.
So let's start about. let me answer the development part first. So right now, all my research is trying to figure out how these cells, where these arrows are pointing to right here, come from and how they're made. Now, what these cells are, what we are hair cells, and hair cells are just a type of mechanosensory neuron, meaning it's a neural cell type. Is some sort of nerve cell that allows us to process external information. In this case, it's really about touch
Mm-hmm.
and certain things related to touch that we can that can be modulated to, like, help the animal stay alive or do certain things. For example, in the animal I work with, which is called a sea anemone,
Mm-hmm.
they eventually go through this form that's called a larvae. Like how you think of it this way, like how you have a caterpillar and then eventually gives rise to a butterfly. It's a little bit similar, but in a way, it's sort of closer to how we develop, where we develop in a very direct way, meaning we just sort of get bigger. You know, a baby doesn't enter a cocoon and become an adult. You just sort of get
Yeah,
bigger,
right.
and in a way, that sort of development is a combination of both, where it's sort of developing directly, but it's also like creating new structures.
Huh.
Like for example, in the larvae form, as you can just see by these two images, this part doesn't have a tentacle, and then this part has a tentacle.
Okay.
So I'm looking at how these hair cells are formed in development during this process of life cycle transition, meaning when it goes from being this larval to a stage where it has the tentacles. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just trying to see how these neurons are being formed. Now, that's the development part.
I
Why
got a
is that
question. I got a
why is
question.
that important?
Question. I'm sorry.
No, no,
Before you,
no, don't be sorry. Go ahead.
you don't put the picture back.
Oh, okay, my bad, my bad. I'll put it back. I thought you wanted me to stop.
I do want you, but it's the questions about the picture. Yes. Well, I can speak without the picture. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Okay, so you said two things are happening. You said that our sea anemone,
Mhm.
yes,
Mhm.
is going through both life cycles, the cycle of the human and the caterpillar, right? They have both. So when I think about humans, because you just said we're just getting bigger, right? But as we get
Mhm.
bigger, there's more, right?
Yeah,
So is that
that's more.
right? So when I think of bigger, I think of more in terms of right, like even we look at like right, skin is your largest organ, right? You have hair follicles all over your skin. Of course, as
Mhm.
you get bigger, your organ gets bigger. You have more. Do you have more hair follicles, or is it the same number of hair follicles that just got big? What's happening, right? Is
All
it?
right.
Is it? Thank you.
No, no, I get you. I get you. I get you. So when I say bigger, you're right. Thank you for saying that, and I'm getting better at that, and I like this. This is a nice opportunity to like really learn how to communicate these things better. By bigger, I mean physically getting bigger, but also it's increasing in number,
Mm,
but it's also not making anything new. Does that make sense? So like
yes.
when you're
Yes.
a baby, your hand gets bigger. You get more cells to get bigger, but you're not making a new hand.
Gotcha.
You're building on exist. What it's just getting like the same structure is just growing.
Just more of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just a type of development. That's what we call direct development.
Gotcha.
And in the sea anemone, there's direct development, but there's also, you could call it indirect development, and that's really what is called metamorphosis. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how butterflies develop. So they have the butterfly, and a lot of insects develop where
Mm-hmm.
they have a larvae stage, and then that larvae eventually eats a bunch. Then it enters this, let's call it a cocoon type thing, and eventually gives rise to the adult stage, which can, if you're a fly, you have wings, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in a way, there's some aspects of that here and some aspects of direct development. And that's even a very big question for biologists like me. So I'm what you call a Evo Devo biologist. So I study evolution and development.
Okay.
So you can look at the development, but where evolution comes is when you want to understand how the last ancestor of a group of animals did that thing. And that
Mm-hmm.
can be very important. because if you understand how the ancestor did it, you can sort of understand how it happens in the descendants of those things.
Hmm. Greetings and welcome to another
Great.
episode of Edusum. My name is Chy'Na Nellon. I am your host. Um, Today I have my guest with me, Ndotimi Apulu,
Yes,
Timmy.
ma'am.
I'm going to allow him to introduce himself a little bit more later, but first I just want to let you know a little bit about the site, right? So this is Edusum. It's a podcast. Edusum is based on the root word of educate, which means to bring it out, right? To educe or to bring it out. It's just a black colloquial phrase for community, right? So we do some, we bring it out of each other, right? So I'm really excited today because it's been a while since I've had a podcast, and we're committing to being consistent this year.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
my first person I have is Ndotimi Apulu. As you may or may not know, I'm currently getting my PhD right now in comparative literature and cultural studies, and that's how I ran into Timmy. So Timmy is getting his PhD in cellular and molecular biology at University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. He is currently a PhD candidate and has a BA in biology. Timmy is Nigerian and from Port Harcourt.
For example, let me use a whole different bunch of animals. For a lot of the world or European world, a lot of those people have Neanderthal ancestors.
Mm-hmm,
The Neanderthals are not modern humans.
mm-hmm,
What happened is that modern humans and Neanderthals existed in around in the same period of time, and
mm-hmm.
then they mated, and
Okay.
that gave rise to a population of hominids that eventually gave rise to the modern humans you see in Europe. And the reason why that's important is because modern humans and Neanderthals, Homo sapiens, and I forget what I can't. I'm gonna butcher Homo neanderthalis or whatever. The
Mm-hmm,
Neanderthals
mm-hmm,
had different, very sim. They were almost exactly the same, but they certain things were very different. And the things that were different were things in their genetic makeup. That's why people say their genome.
mm-hmm,
And that genome is just like the instructions. So think of it like this: your genome is the DNA, is the instructions that then can make new cell types or
mm-hmm,
more different cells. And one of those things is your immune cells, like we were talking about earlier.
mm-hmm,
So let's say the Neanderthals, their immunity was very good for one thing, but very bad for one thing. That could explain why the descendants of those things have the ability to be not like survive some type of illnesses or
That's
disorders,
true.
you know. And that's a big deal when you maybe even this is just me. Again, there's no evidence to what I'm about to say, it's just me like
Rising.
yeah,
Gotcha.
hypothesizing is maybe
Yes.
that's the reason why certain populations get cancer.
Mm,
Because it was the Neanderthals didn't have a way of managing that themselves, or maybe why certain people are more susceptible to some diseases or stuff like that.
mm,
So that's where Evo Devo can be useful.
okay. So I just want to make sure I understand this correctly,
Mhm.
right? I do know that there were Neanderthals. I
Mhm.
was under the impressions that the humans wiped out the Neanderthals. That's not true. It sounds like
No, eventually, like we
it
we we
did.
tend we tend to do, we tend
So,
to keep.
so, so just so that I'm clear, right?
Uh huh.
Neanderthals and human are two separate species. Some of them made together and made a third species.
To you're largely correct. So there were two separate species,
Mm-hmm.
but they were compatible. There's sometimes what you call species compatibility, where you can make a whole new thing. Like the liger, the lion and the tiger. Those are
Mm-hmm.
two separate big cats, two separate
Right.
species, but then they make a liger, which is its own thing.
So what is that called? What is the human Neanderthal called? Excuse me, I said human. They both human. Homo
Huh?
sapien Neanderthal called. Are we Homo Neanderthals or are we Homo sapiens?
We Homo sapiens,
So what happened to the Homo Neanderthals? Where they at?
we killed them.
They gone. Okay,
They
so
gone. They
Neanderthals
gone.
and the Homo Neanderthals is gone.
Yeah,
Got you.
completely. So there's nothing that's what we call there's just no species of it, meaning it's just a Neanderthal, because Neanderthals more like in their anatomy were very similar to us, but very different as well. For example, like we talk because I think at the base of our skull we have this sort of curvature. That's one of the things that's very important for language, at
Mm,
least the language we have. But Neanderthals had a flat base, so they if they communicated, it was not the way we did.
mm,
Those sort of things.
mm.
And
Huh. Okay.
you had all these different populations of things, but eventually the Homo sapiens, which are the modern humans, outcompeted everything else, or
Yes.
or you know killed them. And
That's really interesting though. You know what I'm saying? Like I didn't understand. I always just thought it was two species. It's nice to know that it was more than two, right?
oh, there were a lot of different hominids. That's what we call that group of animals. So, like, we're a hominid species because we're Homo sapiens, but there were Homo neanderthals, there were Homo deniscens, which all these things were able to move. So that's how they were able to migrate to different places. Like, that's why people of African descent don't have, if you're largely African descent, you don't have, most of the time, will not have Neanderthal in you. And if you do, it's mostly because of, for a lot of people, the slave trade and
Yeah.
things
Right.
like that, Yeah.
Wow. That is crazy. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, I would have been interested in science if somebody would talk to me about it like this. You
But I
know?
hope I can do a better job. I'm still learning how to communicate better.
To me, it's about storytelling. You know what I'm saying? If you don't
Yeah,
make it a story,
exactly.
you don't make it interesting. You know what I'm saying? You don't make it something that I can understand. I'm not interested. I'm not engaged. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
But that's why I want to bring you on because you do make it interesting. I be asking questions and I don't feel silly when I ask them. So I
Well,
appreciate
I appreciate it. I appreciate you as well.
you. Yes.
But yeah, I mean, what was
So
it? Oh,
why is the hair important?
why
Right?
hair
Why are
cells
we
important?
looking at the hair cells? Are they different? Okay, so I do have a couple questions.
Hmm.
So why are we looking at the hair cells? Are they different types of cells, right? Because
Hmm.
as I understand it, this is a multicellular organism now, right?
Hmm.
So like we have like levels of hair cell, right, where they function and do different because you said this one was about hearing, no touch. This was about touch, right? This particular cell was about touch. Do they have different functions?
So, in a sense, even the hair cells are involved in hearing. For animals that have that system, the sea anemone, as far as we are concerned, they don't have what's the word in a auditory organ or system.
Hmm.
So they don't necessarily hear, meaning they don't detect sound and interpret it as sound, like voices
Yeah.
and things like that. For us, our system of hearing is based in a way on touch. Because what a hair cell is I'll pull up another slide so I can show it to you
Okay.
as well.
And I was thinking while you're saying that, is there sound in water anyway?
100%.
Yes. So
Yes.
you need sound and because they do this, the whales do the sonar thing. Okay, never
Mm-hmm.
mind. Gotcha.
Plus,
Okay.
like, and to be fair, what all sound is just the compression of media. So the way we talk is that air compresses and expands, and when that happens, it deflects the hair cells in our air, and that deflection is happens at a frequency, and then that eventually is all interpreted as a sound. That's it. So
Right.
that
That's deep.
compression, exactly. So same thing in water because water can compress and expand. So
Hmm.
sound can travel through water, and I'm sure if things can hear, they can
Right.
they can hear in the ocean as well.
Right.
Like you
Right.
said,
And they
whales
would
have
be
sonar.
right. And they would be attuned to that type of speech, for lack of a better word, because
Hmm.
yeah, got you. That makes sense.
So I just wanted to show you what a hair cell is.
Yes.
I think that's really just all my research is just understanding where hair cells come from in sea anemones and for honestly why they evolved in the last common ancestor of the group of sea anemones and bilaterans and how
And this
understanding
is
that process.
important because it could help us figure out how something else happens, right? This is about process, right?
So,
And process can be used in a lot of different spaces.
of course, yes. So, I think one nice tangent I could say is that for us, let me put it this way: if you injure the ear in a very significant way, people get deaf, right?
Hmm.
So the biggest problem with that is the damaging of these hair cells, because we are a group of animals that don't do a very good job of regenerating. Meaning, if we lose some organ or tissue, we don't get it back. So, if we're able to figure out how hair cells are developed in different animals, and these animals have strategies for regenerating them, these could actually be avenues where we could maybe use in ourselves as maybe therapies to cure things like deafness that are related to the loss of hair
Mm-hmm.
cells. So that's why it's very nice to do some of this basic science where we're understanding like the how these things develop, but in the background of evolution. Because if you understand how they evolved, like I was mentioning, you understand how it can how it works in all the descendants. So meaning in the last ancestor of let me I was trying to zoom in or something. All right, so in the last ancestor of some animals like vertebrates, things that have internal skeletons,
Mm-hmm.
this is like what their hair cell tends to look like. For example, this is what the hair cell in your ear sort of looks
Just
like.
one hair cell? Just one hair?
It's so it's just a bunch of different structures. So there are a lot of different words here, but one thing I'm just gonna say is that it has this sort of stalk thing
Mm-hmm.
and a bunch of other things that are connected to it. So how it works is that I hope you can see my cursor in some
Mm-hmm.
way. So
Mm-hmm.
what happens is that when, like, for example, sound, when air compresses and expands, it will deflect this in a direction, and when that happens, it will open some channels here that can affect the charge of the cell. And when that happens, it's detected as a signal, and it can cause a bunch of other things to happen in the cell, like release some special chemicals or proteins, and then that can be used to then affect behavior or be processed in a way to then detect sound. So that's how hair cells more or less work. So it's the basis of, I say touch. So it's what we call tactile, meaning
Mm-hmm.
that it actually it physically affects it and causes the signal to move, whether it's sound or being touched. So
Okay.
that's how hair cells sort of work. And then all I'm trying to do is see how these hair cells are actually being made in in the sea anemone.
So you're
And then
growing them?
sorry?
So you're growing hair cells?
No, I mean they form normally.
Okay.
So I'm just looking at the animal and trying to figure out how they make the cell. Like all the processes that it takes to make the hair cell. So it happens normally. It's
Okay.
just like, for example, in a different example, a lot of animals have eyes. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of when you and then we figured out how a lot of these eyes are made, and then that allowed us to understand that a lot of animals make eyes independently. So the last common ancestor of a lot of animals probably didn't might have not had the eye of a descendant if you go very far back.
Hmm.
Like for example, there's a group of animals called bilaterians. That includes things like humans and flies. Flies have eyes, humans have eyes. But the last common ancestor of a human and a fly, if he had an eye, probably the eye might have not looked structurally might have not looked anything like the human eye or maybe the insect eye,
Hmm.
because they arose independently. So
Mm.
that's the sort of question I'm trying to ask with hair cells.
Okay.
Meaning, are they conserved? Meaning they have the same origin, or was it just like independently everything just made hair cells by themselves?
Okay. I think I
That's
got it.
that's that's a very big chunk of my work. Trying to
Okay.
figure out where these things came from in development so I can ask a question about evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And then by using evolution, I can sort of ask more questions in other animals,
Hmm.
how development might work.
Hmm.
So a lot of biology is very comparative. Figure out how one thing works, you have to compare it to something else.
Okay. So overarching, your
Hmm.
research is trying to figure out whether the hair cells developed independently or via
No, keep
ancestry.
going. Yep, it's exactly that. I think I wrote it verbatim somewhere. Yep, literally that. The evolutionary origin of hair cells. So this is literally it. If I the problem is the evolutionary origins of hair cells we don't understand a lot of it, and it's very because we don't understand a lot of it, it's very hard to reconstruct it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to see how the hair cells are generated in a sister group of animals called the Cnidarians, which in this case is that sea anemone I was talking about. They're part of the
Mm-hmm.
Cnidarians.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm just trying to figure out the developmental origin of the hair cells so I can eventually start to answer this problem of the evolutionary origin. Like you said it perfectly. That's all I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing.
Okay. I got it now. It only took me a year to understand, but I understand now. I got it.
You
Yes.
get it.
Yes. We
So
here.
if anything, I'm just being a very nosy person. I'm trying to understand how this group of animals did things
Mm-hmm.
so I could better see if we did the same thing as well.
Yeah. So I'm gonna stop because I'm just gonna have way more and more questions. But let's
No,
gonna
you
be my
good.
last question, and then we're gonna start wrapping up.
Okay.
So I understand what you're looking for now.
Okay.
I guess my question is, what will this do?
What would this do?
Yes, once we figure out how the hair follicles, hair cells are made
Hmm.
and sea enemy, can they reproduce the cells on their own already? Is that why we're interested? They already know how to reproduce those cells?
So that's part of the strategy. I will say the hair cells and hair follicles are two different things.
Ah.
Yeah, yeah. A hair cell is just a mechanosensory cell, like I showed you. A hair follicle is just like people use the term hair is used a lot, and hair cell was called hair cell because it looked like hair. That's it.
Hmm.
But really it's actually a neuron, very similar to the neuron you have in your brain and stuff like that. It's a neuron.
So what are we looking at again? Because I thought I knew, but now I
No,
maybe
no, you do. The problem is semantics. It's just semantics. It's semantics.
okay.
It's just the
So,
word
but
we
so a
use.
hair cell is different from a follicle, is what you're
Yes.
telling me.
So
All
like
right.
the hair that's on our skin is very different from a hair cell in our ear.
Got you. Thank you. And I did need that distinction because I'm making them the same. And you're
No,
telling
you
me that
fine.
they're very different and they serve different purposes, right?
Different
So the
purposes.
hairs, the small, fine hairs that I have inside of my ear do not function or form the same as the hair that is on my head or on the outside of my body.
Yes, they're completely made differently.
Had no idea. I'm making them the same hair.
No,
Thank
you
you.
fine. You
That
fine.
helps a lot.
You see the problem with the language? That's one thing biologists need to get better at. They tend to, it's not necessarily be lazy, but very opinionated. So they tend to be like, yeah, we're gonna call this, and that's that. You know.
Mm,
So in a way, that's why it can be very confusing as well, because we just need to do a better job of saying it. That's why the language I try to use is mechanosensory neuron, and then an example of that is what we call the hair cell. But I tend to call them neurons
so
nowadays.
is that the only place that we have neurons is in our ear?
No, we have them everywhere. We just it's just a type of neuron.
No, I mean the hair ones.
That specific one
Yeah.
in the ear. I'm blanking, but for the most part, that
Not
specific
like the
cell.
nose, right? Because you have hair in your nose, but that's
Yeah,
similar to
that
like in your
there
head.
there's hair in your nose, but the hair cells in your ear
It's
are not
different.
from hair follicles.
So
So the
hair in
ones
your
that
nose is from hair follicles.
yeah, it's from a hair follicle. You pull it out, there's a follicle.
I'm just making sure because it's allergies. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if allergies has some. I don't know. I'm just
No,
asking
you
questions.
good, you good, you good.
Asking questions. So our ears are special, and they have a. I didn't know that they have a whole different type of hair that's growing there that is not based on follicles.
Yes, it's not a follicle. So we just call it a cell, but you could just call it if you want to, you could call it a neuron because that's what it really is.
Okay, and these neurons are help us to hear.
Yes, so it's a neuron because eventually it can detect signal and then send that signal. And then
Mm.
eventually what allows us to hear is when it's processed. That's when we hear. So when that information gets to the brain and then the brain processes it, that's when we hear. But all it does in the ear is just detecting that signal and transmitting that to the brain through by communicating with either directly or with other cells in between.
Well, you have given me an earful today.
I apologize for rambling.
No, not at all. No, not at all. Like, so one of the things that I really love about Edusum and about like knowledge and education in
Mhm.
general is I'm a nerd, right? So I love to talk to people who are excited about the work and the research that they do because I just have a whole lot of questions. It's
Mhm.
easier to ask Timmy than to read, the 50,000 books that Timmy has read to get to the amount of
Mhm.
information that Timmy has, right? But like the more you know, the more you understand that you don't know. And I think
Mhm.
one of the benefits of being a scholar is understanding the nuance of the
Mhm.
type of work and scholarship that I do. So I understand that when you talk to me about something, there's
Mhm.
nuance. You know what I'm saying? And there's like
Mhm.
way more to it than whatever I could think of, than whatever I could think of on the surface level, or whatever it is that you're able to express to me. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like articulation is hard. Like the ideas that I
Mhm.
have on up here about my research and what I'm actually able to put into words to express to somebody else. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? There's like a large gap from the amount of knowledge that I have in my head to what I'm able to express. So I like to ask questions and I like to have like these type of platforms and these type of conversations. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
About subject matter that might feel out of reach. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
That we wouldn't be able to understand, you know what I'm saying? Because we can't understand it. We just need someone to explain it to us in a way, right?
Mhm.
That is somewhat accessible and to not be scared to like ask some silly questions. And I'm not. So I'll ask
Well,
all the questions.
I'm glad you're not. I'm not. I'm glad. That's why I respect you deeply for many things, but and I respect the fact that you're just not scared to ask questions. And I think nobody should be, because you should get an answer. And if anybody doesn't give you an answer, that tells you more about their character. And I think everything we do with science, it should be accessible to the public. Because if it's not, then that's elite. That's some elitist bull crap, and I'm not
And
about
what's
that.
the point, right? Like
Yeah,
if it's not accessible, like what's the point of having the information, right?
like
I think articulation is really important for our scholarship in general, right? I think I've
yes,
told you before, if my grandma who's 87 can't understand what I'm talking about, what am I doing it for, right?
exactly.
So I'm all about accessibility. And also when you talk to us about your process, we understand like what you're doing and why it takes so much for your research and why, you have to be in a lab. And do you see what I'm saying? We understand what
Madam, if you could tell my mother the same thing, I'll be very happy.
I'm gonna send her the video. Don't worry about it. We're gonna send her the video. We're gonna send the video. Okay. So this video is for Timmy's mom. You can
Thank you.
see what Timmy has been up to, right? What all it
Mama,
takes to be a researcher.
Mama, I love you. This I'm not trying to fight you. Just so when you see this, I'm not targeting you, just so you know.
Not at all. And like I said, we're gonna have some more PhDs in different areas come on and and
That's
talk about kind of
beautiful.
their research and like the process it takes, what it takes to be a PhD if it's something that you're interested in, like
Mm-hmm.
advanced scholarship. And also, I just want to say thank you, Timmy, right, for being a
Anytime.
black male who is getting an advanced degree. Like as you just mentioned, like we've seen one graduate in your time since you've been there, right? Which is scary, right? But thank you for putting in the work and being consistent and following through because you're almost at the end. You're
Amen
almost
to
there.
that. Yeah,
Yes.
we gonna get it. We gonna get it. And
Yes.
you know,
Dr. Apulu, you ready?
I'm grateful. Yeah, I'm ready. I'm grateful to the community and my community and just the support because it takes a village.
It does.
You know, it doesn't have to. There's more than research for the PhD. Now I'm a spiritual person, which a lot of scientists might not be, but there's a lot of how you need to maintain that. I think all of that needs to be on point
That's right.
because, as you know, the PhD is something that challenges you on a lot of levels, and that is not something that's always easy to communicate, especially when it's not something people can experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, especially also like I mentioned about structure and like in the United States, the beautiful thing about this country, is they like to support scientific endeavors, but there's also a lot of flexibility. And that
Mm-hmm.
also means that you just don't know how long things are gonna go.
That's part of
Versus,
the problem.
yep.
Mm-hmm.
And in Europe, they're like 4 years. That's it. You're going to chug it out. And that can be very beneficial.
Right. Yeah. That is definitely. I'll
Mhm.
speak to that a little bit too. That's definitely one of the scary
Mhm.
things about PhDs in American institutions. Right.
Mhm.
Some of the horror stories are people being here 9, 10 years and not leaving with a degree. Right.
Mhm.
And I'm not even talking about the sciences. I'm talking about humanities. I'm talking about English. You know what I'm
Can
saying? Which is
imagine.
insane to me. Right. it, but having a plan,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like understanding, like one of the things my professor has told to me recently is trying to complete a PhD is a good PhD, right? I think sometimes as researchers, our goals can be outlandish.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm sure that Timmy is not trying to figure out all of the different ways that hair follicles can function
No,
in
thank you.
see, and you know what I'm saying? Right? We're looking for one, you know what I'm saying, one thing,
Mm-hmm.
one thread, one, and with my research, I'm trying to narrow my focus as much as possible, right? I can't talk
Mm-hmm.
about all the different ways that we interact and communicate
Mm-hmm.
online, new technologies that are constantly emerging. It's not realistic, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So understanding what it is that we can bite off and get done in the amount of time and being okay with that. Yeah. Just getting done. Being
That's for me. That's the goal now. But like I mentioned, the mental part. It took, if I'm being honest, it took humility to
mm,
accept that.
mm,
It took a lot of learning humility and just learning that, and also not being delusional, just being barely clear lens, not having delusions of grandeur, but also in a very constructive way that I'm not like, you're gonna do something, but you're not biting off more than, like you just say, you're not biting off more than you can chew.
yeah.
You know, you got to do what you can and do it really well, and
Yes.
move on. Cause
Yes.
I don't want to be doing this for, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it.
I
I don't want to
understand.
be doing this forever.
Right? You got to, like you said, you got to have a plan to get out. You can't just be wandering around in the dark. I think we said that at the beginning.
Yep,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yep. And you know what? As a religious man, which is going, if any other scientist watches this video, that's your own problem. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, I say to the universe, to God, God be the glory. And for the spirituality part, that like I'm really glad that as I went through this PhD process, I really took time lately, at least the last 2 years, to really grow that part of my life. Because I think that helped my ability to think
Mm-hmm.
and preserve my peace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because like a lot of people can go through this like there was something you told me, I'm only gonna do this once, so I have to learn to enjoy it and love it. And the thing I've learned about a lot of my some of my friends that finish their PhDs is that they become bitter because it takes away from them. And I won't lie, it's taken away from me, but I don't gotta give it that power.
Okay.
So that's a big part of the process that I don't, that it's easy, and it's very easy for people to judge on the outside and just be like, why were you tripping? Just do what you got to do. But like there's all the steps of where you're trying to get to, and
Mm-hmm.
there's the time commitments, and when a lot of what you need to do is repetitive and takes hours and hours of your life,
And it's hard.
it's
It
hard.
is
Yeah.
hard. It is hard. Like it is hard, right? Like learning self-control, learning
Yep.
how, and what I mean by self-control is like learning how to pace yourself, learning how to
Mm,
go back at something after you've looked at it 1,000 times and trying to find something new, learning how to put
mhm.
something down and walk away and come back, right? And
Mhm.
have to pick it up, not having
Mhm.
anybody like over your head because it's your research, right? I think a lot of times I understand, a lot of
Mhm.
times people don't understand that by the time you're in a PhD program, you're creating new research or you're adding on to existing research, right? So there
Mhm.
are no guidelines really, there are no parameters really, right?
Mhm.
Going, or for me in my program, I'm kind of going back and forward with my instructors on what I think it could or should look like in this space and
Mhm.
trying to create that, right? Like for you, I can't even imagine, right? You're trying to find something brand new, right? You're not even created. Like I get to create, right? So I get to make it, right? You got to go discover it. So but I think a lot of times people don't understand that that is a process in and of itself, right?
Mhm.
Creation. So,
And a lot of science is about not finding a lot of things, but it's still informative, right?
mm,
And I think that's what. Sorry, I cut you off. That was bad of me. But I think that's the thing that everybody. There's this stereotype of science where you're constantly finding something new and it's easy. And I'm just there like, no. It took 50 years for us to finally understand something. It took physics. It took 100 years to finally find evidence of some things that Einstein said. Like, come on now.
yeah, it's like that
No.
overnight success idea, right? Like, there's no such thing. You can't be an overnight success, right? Because whatever the thing is, you either have to practice in order to get it done, right? You have to
Mhm.
Like even if it's cooking, you make the best gumbo overnight. Like no, there's like my
Nope.
grandma made this gumbo, her great grandma made this gumbo. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I'm saying? Like ain't nothing overnight about this process. I feel you. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why they say in science you're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Of the people that
Period.
came before you.
Not in a sense, literally, right?
Literally.
Quite literally, particularly in my scholarship, right? Because I use Black scholarship to ground everything that I do. So
Mm-hmm.
I literally standing on, you know what I'm saying, my
Mm-hmm.
ancestors when I talk about anything that I talk about. 100%. Yes. Yes.
That's definitely how I feel about science. Cause like all the tools I use for, I didn't obviously this is not me. I did not make this, but like almost every tool I use is a Nobel Prize winning idea.
I say.
That's crazy to me.
Hmm.
Eventually, some of the major things I use in molecular biology was done for years, and that became because of status, right? The status that the Nobel Prize has, and I'm just there like, look at how we take it for granted now. Something that became a Nobel Prize, people just do it in their sleep without thinking.
Yeah.
To me, that's the standing on the like you said on the shoulders of giants, and I'm just there like it's very humbling.
It is.
Learning the humility for me.
Yeah.
Not that I wasn't a humble person before, but I probably was not as much as I am now.
Everybody got a little ego. It's healthy. I don't think you can be a PhD student without ego, right? You have to think that you have an idea or something that is worth putting out into the
Mm-hmm.
world. You know what I'm saying? Or adding to the world to even pursue a degree of that nature. You know what I'm saying? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's monumental. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot. Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I think we gotta have a little bit of ego. I definitely got some. I got some ego over here. Yes.
You've met me.
Yeah.
You've met me. I'm Nigerian. That's all I had to say. That's all I had to say.
Okay.
Ah,
Well, thank you so much, Timmy. This has
thank you, man.
been a great session. You stayed there. I'm going to end the session. You chill, right? But I just wanted to let our audience know this will be available on YouTube and all Edusome platforms and on
YouTube? I'm
yeah,
gonna be on the tube. Oh my days.
all Edusome platforms, which is Instagram, Facebook, and on our channel, which is on Roku, Culturally Emerging Media. So if you just want to go and support a Black network, please go to Roku, download Culturally Emerging Media. It is still a free channel.
See, I got it. I'm gonna put it on my Roku right now.
I say, there you go. All right.
Thank you for the honor, honestly.
Of course.
And
Yes.
you're a great host. I felt at ease. It was just a regular conversation to me.
That's what it's a discussion session. Yes. Awesome.
All
All
right,
right.
take care, madam.
Likewise.
I'll see
Peace.
you.